This is the Kolari Magnetic Clip-In Optical Low-Pass Filter, or OLPF, for Lumix L-Mount. You may have seen my previous video which focused on the pre-production model of this product, but this video is going to focus on the final production model. The final production filter is comprised of a CNC machined aluminum frame that holds a glass filter. This glass has a hydrophobic coating which makes it easier to clean. So what is the purpose of an OLPF? The main purpose of an OLPF is to reduce moire and aliasing in photography, and more specifically in video. While photographers have tools in Lightroom that let them simply brush the moire out, the tools for video are much less powerful. You can use tools like Neat Video or Resolve Zone built-in noise reduction, or even blurring certain color channels to help mitigate moire, but this is going to have downsides too, like reducing overall detail in that area, and often leaving artifacts behind that just can't be fixed. So it's better to just fix this issue in particular at the source if you can. Now, the importance of reducing moire and aliasing all depends on your field of work. You might not need this at all. So while the main purpose of an OLPF is to reduce moire and aliasing, the way in which it does that will actually soften the image too. And that gets me into the next topic I want to talk about, which is how an OLPF works. First, I want to try to explain why moire happens in the first place. So in a nutshell, it occurs when tight patterns or tight lines are arranged in a way that exceed the resolution of the sensor that's trying to capture it. More specifically, this fine detail that I'm talking about is smaller than a full pixel. So it only registers at a sub-pixel level. So when this detail is super fine, the pixels only register as red, green, or blue. And that's when you see that multicolored moire. So how does an OLPF help solve this problem? Simply put, an OLPF slightly blurs the higher frequency light waves before it actually hits the sensor. This blurring of the high frequency light waves helps prevent the sensor from trying to resolve detail that it physically cannot. This is also why higher resolution sensors, such as the 8K S1R2, are less prone to moire in general. So a byproduct of how the OLPF works, as you can imagine, is a slightly softer image. This occurs because of that high frequency light wave blurring. Now, the extent of the softening that you'll see is highly dependent on the strength of the OLPF itself. All right, so now that you have a general idea of how an OLPF works and why it's made in the first place, let's check out some examples. First, I want to show examples of the Lumix S1 II with and without the filter. Let's start by comparing a generic moire chart. So as you can see, while it does not completely remove the moire, it significantly reduces it. Now let's take a look at how this filter handles my infamous moire suit. This suit in particular seems to create moire really badly, so it's a great test subject. So as you can see again, it does not remove all of the moire completely, but it does a really great job at reducing it, especially the really atrocious moire. Now I did find some focal lengths and specific distances from my suit that the Kolari OLPF struggled with, and I believe that just has to do with the strength of the OLPF. The Kolari OLPF appears to be outperforming the S1H in these chart tests. So in a couple of my previous videos, people actually didn't believe that the S1H footage I was showing was real. They thought it was fabricated. So in order to prove that the clips you're about to see are in fact from the S1H, I decided to shoot some BTS. The Kolari OLPF also appears to be outperforming the S1H in most of these suit tests. However, when I put the Kolari OLPF back in that situation that it didn't do well in, the S1H actually does a great job. I'm not exactly sure why this is. I know all OLPFs are designed a little bit differently, so it could just be down to the optical design. I wanted to put this Kolari OLPF up against an OLPF that I know is very strong, and that's the one in the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K. So as you can see, the Cinema Camera 6K is extremely clean. It definitely outperforms the Kolari OLPF, which by default means it outperforms the S1H's OLPF. Based on these comparisons, it seems like Kolari landed somewhere in between the strength of an S1H OLPF and the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K OLPF. Overall, that's not bad. I would love to see Kolari come out with a even higher strength OLPF in the future. So while it was designed to work with 6K sensors, I was really surprised to see how well it did on the Lumix S1R2. So you can see by these examples that it's doing a great job at reducing moire. But because it's not made for an 8K sensor, I really wanted to see how big of a sharpness hit the S1R2 image takes with it. Here are some comparisons to show the impact on overall sharpness. I will leave it up to the S1R2 users to decide if the sharpness impact is acceptable to them. So again, while the overall purpose of an OLPF is not to reduce sharpness, it does have an impact. You may find the impact is too much, too little, or just right, depending on your needs. So if you take a look at the impact of sharpness on my beard hairs and my skin's pores, it's pretty hard to see too much of an impact unless you zoom in to around 150%. Now, if you take a look at this comparison when shot on my Lumix 100mm macro, I do see a difference a little easier. Now, I know there's some people out there that wanted to see some generic sharpness chart comparisons, so I did shoot that, and here are the side-by-side comparisons. I'm not going to dive into the technical differences that might be here, but I will leave this up for you to take a look at and decide for yourself. So I know I'm really driving this point home. While the main purpose of the OLPF is not to reduce sharpness, it's going to do that. And I think a reason a lot of people think that's the whole purpose or correlate cinematic images with an OLPF is because a lot of cinema cameras have an OLPF, but the main reason they're in there is to eliminate or reduce moire. Because of that correlation between cinema cameras having them and a lot of hybrid mirrorless cameras not having them, people think that if you put one in a camera, it's all of a sudden gonna be cinematic. And I think it does help a bit. I think it does take that digital edge off. But I think that's why the correlation exists. So I did want to show how this filter looks out in the wild, quite literally, to give people a sense of the image quality you can expect when filming with it. I shot in Blackmagic RAW 8:1. This was done to show the footage as untainted as possible by removing as much internal filtering as possible. I chose B-RAW over internal ProRes RAW to unlock full frame 5.7K 60 frames a second. So this filter and any clip-in filter like it will have an impact on corner sharpness. This is because the shape of the frame plus the addition of the glass actually causes the light to bend a little bit at the edges before hitting the sensor. And this causes the edges to fall slightly out of focus. Now the OLPF is thicker than Kolari's other clip-ins, so the impact on corner sharpness will be a little bit greater. The worst cases that I've found are when shooting wider than 24mm in open gate at apertures 5.6 and lower. I first tested 24mm in 16:9 and open gate. Both of them were pretty acceptable, with 16:9 being more acceptable. I then tested my Lumix 18mm in 16:9 and open gate. In 16:9 I found the results okay, but in open gate I found the impact to be significant. So because of this finding, I would just be cautious about shooting open gate with lenses wider than 24mm. It really depends on what you're shooting again. Luckily, this filter is not permanent, so if you like having the ability to remove moire and soften your image in 90% of your shooting scenarios, but you happen to shoot landscapes every now and then, you can just pop the filter out. Impact on vignetting was actually a little surprising to me. While corner sharpness definitely took a hit in open gate with ultrawides, I found no vignetting, even at 18 millimeters and in open gate. This one was a big one for me because I have the permanent OLPF mod by Kolari on one of my Lumix S5 IIs. It works great, but one of the downsides of that mod is a very cool color cast. So I was really happy to find that the color cast of using this clip-in OLPF is very minor. And as you can see in these side-by-side tests, the cast is there, but it's very minor. I would say that the color cast is much more minor than variable NDs, in line more with regular NDs. So at least in the few tests that I did, the high resolution photo mode itself kind of negates the need for an OLPF. It kind of makes sense. The high resolution photo mode, it's capturing a lot more detail, a lot more resolution than the sensor can capture natively. And as you can see, both with and without the OLPF, the high res mode is basically void of any moire. I didn't do significant testing on this, but this result alone kind of shows me what's going on. So it's pretty cool. Does this filter work when filming LCD screens? Filming LCD screens is extremely tricky for most sensors. Panasonic actually makes a PTZ style camera to film live streaming because they always have like a big projector screen behind them. So they have an OLPF designed to take care of that issue. So it's a very specific use case. I decided to run a quick test, and as you can see, it does help a little bit, but it's definitely still present. To be fair, the S1H also had trouble when filming LCD screens. So I was kind of struggling to think of a way to really test the autofocus in a repeatable way. So in order to make them repeatable and controlled, I decided to do them at home. I tried to think of some ways to make it a little more challenging than just walking towards and away from the camera. So I did put it in some backlit situations, and I also created a little obstacle course for myself to try and trip up the camera. So when watching both of these comparisons back, I personally don't see a huge difference in the performance. I think when you compare them apples to apples, they're both very similar. So another question I kept getting was, what about IBIS impact? And I think that question just came from people not realizing how the OLPF was actually installed. Because the OLPF is not installed on the sensor, it does not touch the sensor at all, there is zero impact on IBIS. Okay, let's talk about people's concern about the magnet's long-term durability. In particular, people that shoot in hot environments repeatedly. They are attached essentially with very strong 3M tape. So I reached out to Kolari and they sent me the spec sheet for that tape, and it says it's rated to work at 70 degrees Celsius, which is 158 degrees Fahrenheit. for days or weeks at a time, and up to 150 degrees Celsius, which is about 300 degrees Fahrenheit, for hours at a time. So I think we'll be safe. That's pretty hot. I would say just make sure that when you install the magnets that the area that you're installing it to is clean and dry, and you should be good. The reason secondary lens flares occur in the first place, let's say you're filming into a hard light source, some of that light is going to reflect off the sensor and then reflect off of the clip-in filter in front of it and then back towards the sensor. So that's going to create a secondary flare that mixes with the lens flare that your lens produces naturally. So these secondary lens flares occur with all of the Kolari clip-in filters or anyone else that creates clip-in filters. The look of those secondary flares depends on the coating on that clip-in filter. When inspecting the Kolari OLPF, I see an amber coating, which I'm actually really happy about because that's a pretty pleasing lens flare color to me. The Nikkor 35mm, it's got some fun kind of purple-y lens flares. And you can see here that the amber secondary lens flare, I think, blends in nicely. This is all going to be personal preference. As you can see, the Sigma has its own green lens flare. I think the amber lens flares blend pretty well. Whenever I'm shooting into a hard light source, I'm kind of going for a funky lens flare. I don't personally mind if it's mixed with green and amber, but again, personal preference. Using this filter with fully manual lenses that have hard stops as well as anamorphic lenses. I want to do as much as I can to call out what you're going to have to deal with to make sure that this is right for you and if you're willing to deal with the either shortcomings or the workarounds to get the lenses to work properly. I'll start with the fully manual lenses with hard stops. So putting the glass in between the sensor and the lens is going to, simply put, bring your infinity focus point closer to you. Let's say you look at your lens barrel, you're focusing to infinity, you're gonna hit things that are at infinity before your lens barrel actually says infinity right there. Your close focus distance is also going to be hit sooner. So that means you're going to lose some of that close focus ability. So I found with ultra wide, fully manual lenses, the impact of close focus was much more significant than anything to do with infinity focus. Infinity focus, you can always reach it. It's just going to happen sooner. We're using a Nikkor 20mm f3.5. And I'm about as close focus as I can get. I'm going to put the optical low pass filter on and see how this impacts the close focus on an ultra wide full manual lens. So as you can see with this example on the Nikkor 20mm, I had to move my camera back about 6 inches to hit close focus. And you can see by the differences in the images that there's a pretty big impact. I've ran this test on my ultra wide Lumix 18mm, and you can see that the close focus difference is very, very minimal. Wow. Barely anything. Much less of a difference. I moved back maybe half a centimeter. So a small impact on close focus when using fly-by-wire lenses. I also tested my Lumix 100mm macro. That's the one I really felt like was most important for close focus and found it was not impacted in any significant way. But all of this said, I'm sure most of you would rather just have the lens work as it's intended. In order to do that, you're going to have to shim manual lenses. I haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty of the exact sizes of shims that you need. I would really recommend you reach out to Kolari, who are knowledgeable on this subject, and tell them your concerns. They should be able to point you in the right direction for sizes of shims at least, and then you can go find the ones you need. So the impact on using this filter with anamorphic lenses is a little bit more complicated. That just has to do with the way that anamorphic lenses work. I'm not a pro in the anamorphic world at all. I actually don't use them. I know I should. So luckily there was a Lumix user by the name of Alex Hersenthopoulos. He's an anamorphic shooter, a DP based in LA. And he wanted to use this product, but he loves shooting with anamorphics. So he discovered that if you use PL-mount anamorphics, you have to use a PL to L-mount adapter. And he found that if you shim the adapter itself, that the anamorphics behave as they should. So I know that's not going to work with native L-mount anamorphics, but a lot of anamorphics luckily do come in PL mount. So he let me know which shim stock that he uses, and I'll post a link to that below. So that is a workaround if you want to use this filter and anamorphics. I'm hoping that I touched on most of the questions people had and most of the things people were interested in. But of course, if you have other questions, just leave them in the comment section below. It's my hope that this review is going to help Kolari come out with, better versions of the optical low pass filter, or maybe even filters that just focus on softening. Who knows? Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the small channel. If you do want to purchase the filter, there's affiliate links down below for both the EU and US store. It might still say back ordered, but even if it does, you can purchase the filter and they'll be shipping out in 2 to 3 weeks. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I hope this helped.